Hello friends, very good afternoon and welcome to the EduSite Network. Our today's topic of discussion is part of our series on the beginnings of Indian art and architecture in early India, and for this discussion we have with us in our studio Dr. Seema Bawa. She is Professor, Department of History, University of Delhi. And to just tell you about the topic for today, it is Narrative Art at Sanchi Stoop 1. So friends, this is our topic of discussion today, and I would like to welcome ma'am to our EduSite studio, and I hand over the control now, and she shall take over and start out today's lecture. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Hi. We had discussed last time the beginnings of Indian art and architecture in Bharut and Sanchi Stoop 1 and associated sites such as Andheri, Sadhara and Sonari, which are in and around Sanchi. But really, if we look at Sanchi as a site as well as the main Mahastoop, which is Sanchi Stoop 1, we understand how a monastic as well as a site of veneration really developed in history. So it's a historically very important site in order to understand not just art and architecture, but also how post-Mauryan religion, culture and economy developed, because it is Sanchi as a site is in very close relationship to Vidisha. Vidisha was a very important trading town as well as a political center, and we have evidence of this in various ways from the Mauryan time onwards, where it has been recounted in some sources that his wife Devi was from Vidisha, and he did visit Vidisha, and this is where he actually developed an interest in Buddhism. Also, we do have this notion that it is from the close by site of Sanchi that envoys to various other places such as Sri Lanka and important Buddhist envoys went. Thirdly, we do know that it was Vidisha, like Bharut, fell on the Dakshina Path, and that is a trading land route which ran from Taxila down to the Deccan, as well as it was on one of the offshoots of the Uttarapath, which connected Taxila again to Patliputra and further east. Now, being at the heart of this very important trading route, it attracted a lot of patronage. Secondly, that one would like to point out is that during the early period, we do not have stupas and monastic sites in the center of the town, but near a town, so that the religious, ritual and learning activities related to monasticism, things like Updesh, things like editing various canonical texts, learning the teachings of Buddha, meditation, are not disturbed by everyday urban activity. But they are also not so far that practical visiting activities by the inhabitants of the town or alms collecting activities by the monks are not affected. So, like Peter Burke has said, in context of Europe, monks basically are people of the monasteries as well as people of the markets, right? So this is a role that we see the monks who live in Sanchi also play. Sanchi, again, chronologically is a very variegated site. We will be discussing the chronology per se of Sanchi Stoop 1, but just as a site, if you look at it, it starts in the Mauryan period, but it has monuments such as Sanchi Stoop number 2 and Sanchi Stoop number 3, which can be dated to 1st century BC. Then you have Sanchi Stoop number 1, which again will be, I'll just be doing. We have the first important Gupta temple, Sanchi temple number 17. Connected to that is another Gupta temple, or just a little later is Sanchi temple number 40, which is an apsidal pillared temple, and then the building activity continues up till at least the 11th and 12th century, where we have a number of temples, monastic sites, etc. Right? Now, this I would like to show you this slide in order to show you the landscape in which Sanchi is situated. So, if you would see here that Sanchi is really within this kind of hilly, plateauy landscape, and it is one of the highest in the entire area. So, you can see Sanchi, the stoop number 1, from the surrounding areas also. On the terraces below the main stupa, you have monastic sites such as this one, where you can see there are various cells for the residential quarters of the monks, as well as an inner courtyard which was used for assembly, meditation, and other Buddhist rituals. All right. Now, we will look at the history of the stupa. We have discussed that Vidisha was a very wealthy and important trading center, and patronage was given not only to Buddhism but as well to the Bhagavatas, or the early Vishnu or Vaishnava sects, which we can see from the pillar of Heliodorus, which we had also seen last time. Sanchi was variously known as Kakanava, Kakanya, Kakanabota, and Bota Sri Parvata in ancient times. Sri Parvata because it is on a hill. Of all the structures, stupa number 1 is the largest. It is called a Mahastupa. Mahastupa is that in which the relics of the Buddha himself are enshrined, okay, or are actually put buried inside the stupa. There are stupas such as stupa number 2 and stupa number 3, as well as other related stupas, which have relics of 10 important teachers of Buddha, who were Buddha's disciples, such as Sariputra, Mahamoggallana, etc. But this must have been a Mahastupa. Okay? The core of this is Mauryan. We do know that the first part of this must have been Mauryan. Then this we can also deduce from the fact that you have a Mauryan pillar right next to the southern gateway, the Torana. Now, this southern gateway is very important to the entire scheme. It was probably the first gateway to be constructed. But this Mauryan core can be seen from an inscribed pillar. Okay. The stupa was then enlarged during the Shunga times, when it was encased in stone and the Vedika, or the railing, was erected around it. The Vedika is in a swastika plan, that is, it has 4 returns in or entrances in the 4 cardinal directions. On top of this is the Vedika of the Harminika, which surrounds the Yashti, or the pole, which suggests an older design of the Vriksha Chaitya, or a shrine, was being adapted to the stupa. We will be seeing that you have the symbolism, and on the Yashti you have the 3 chhatras, 3 umbrellas, which symbolize the 3 ratna: Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami, Sangham Sharanam Gacchami. But also this umbrella symbolizes sovereignty of the Buddha, and on top of that it also means the Chakravartin status of the Buddha, that is that his message is going to spread all over, all around, in a concentric manner. Of all the Toranas, the South Torana is probably the oldest, both on stylistic grounds and because it was the principal entrance to the sacred compound, where both the Ashokan pillar as well as the beginnings of the staircase leading to the middle circumambulatory are located. The inscription on the top architraves of the southern gateway shows part of it was donated by the foreman of artisans of Sri Shatkarni. It is, the inscription says, gift of Ananda, the son of Vashiti, the foreman of artisans of Rajan Sri Shatkarni. Shatkarni may be dated to AD 11 to 29. As you know, that Shatkarni has often been used for Shatvahana rulers of the Deccan area, and they probably had some connection to this area also. Maybe they had some kind of a suzerainty, but they had some political connection also. This is important, that is why we call it a Shunga Shatvahana monument, because it extends from the time of the Shungas, the main Sanchi as it stands now. It is related mainly to the Shungas and Shatvahanas, and that era. That is not to say that it's the Shunga kings and the Shatvahana kings who were donating. There were a lot of other people, the artisans and laywomen, bhikshus, bhikshunis, all of them were donating to the temple, but it's during their reign that we have dated the temple, the stupa. Now, the other important thing about this is that here we do know that there is the entire Toranas are being made in a later period, later than the Shungas. So, it's a site that was constantly under worship from the Mauryas till a very late period, and it was constantly being added upon, right? But from, say, the 12th century till the early 18th century, 19th century, it went into a ruinous state, and then it was rediscovered by the colonial archaeologists and antiquarians. In 1851, Alexander Cunningham sank a shaft in the center of the stupa on Sanchi Hill, and he unearthed a large stone slab more than 5 feet in length lying in the north-south axis. Beneath these were 2 boxes of grey sandstone with the inscription in Brahmi saying Sariputta and Mahamoglanasa. That means that which were discovered in the 3rd stup. These arhants were also found, the relics of these arhants were also found at Satadhara. Now, this just goes to show that you have this site being inhabited, or the relics of very important religious teachers and disciples of the Buddha being interned here. Now, a stup, as you know, is a funerary mound. That is, that it is covered, it covers the relics of very important dead saints, teachers, what we will call very special dead. All right. Now, here some of those who are interned or who are whose relics are actually were buried in this place were contemporaries of Buddha, and they died during Buddha's time himself and were actually cremated during his time, and their remains were later taken out and distributed in all the stupas around Sanchi 1 and other related stupas. In terms of the religious background of Sanchi, it has often been called Proto-Mahayan. Now, it's been called Mahayan. Mahayan basically talks about the worship of the Bodhisattva, and it also talks about basically it talks about the intervention of the Bodhisattva on behalf of the devotees. So it's kind of a more popular version of the Buddhist faith. Now, why has Sanchi been called Proto-Mahayan? Because here lay worship is emphasized over monastic ideals. Secondly, the egalitarian ideas of Mahayana are also espoused according to scholars. The Yaksha Dwarapalas who are can be seen on the entrances like in Bharut, but here also have been interpreted not as Dwarapalas or Yakshas but more as Bodhisattvas, because they do have some imagery which later develops into the Bodhisattva imagery. Now, whether they are Bodhisattvas or Yakshas or they borrow from each other is a very debatable point, but there are scholars who believe that this was a Mahayanist monument. But we also have to keep in mind that we do not find the image of Buddha anywhere in the Vedika or on the Torana at Sanchi Stup number 1, which suggests that he is still being worshipped in his aniconic form, that is through his symbols. So, it is very difficult to say that Sanchi Stup number 1 was a Mahayan monument. Later, of course, you have a number of images of Buddha being enshrined in the various temples as well as in the Pradakshina. Okay, but these are later Gupta period icons and up to the early medieval period. So we can absolutely say that they are not there during the main period. Secondly, each Torana has an imprecatory inscription which says that anybody who disturbs the stupa and its remains shall be treated as somebody who goes against the faith. And here the term used is Arhat, the remains of the Arhat. So, Arhat is a term that is used in the Hinayan Theravada tradition. Again, this is something that we would like to emphasize. It also became a very important center of the Mool Sarvastivadin school. In terms of those who donated, again we have to discuss the material basis of the historical remains at Sanchi Stup number 1. There are 631 inscriptions. Of these, on the 4 gateways, as I have just said, there are imprecatory inscriptions. All the rest of the inscriptions are donative in character. That is, that they give either a part of the harmika, they give part of a suchi, that is the crossbar, stambha, torana, going as far as even paving stones have been donated. So, and very interestingly, you have successive slabs, one after the other, that have been donated by the same person or the same family, which suggests that there were multiple donations being made. Okay. Why were these donations made? These were made in order to get merit, religious, spiritual merit, as well as for the benefit of the monastic community. Okay. Indeed, in monastic community itself was the largest donor. You have more than 130 donors which come from the Sangha, the Buddhist Sangha, those who were monks and nuns. Of the number of women, there are slightly less than half who have donated. Okay. Now this is interesting because at Bharut only almost up to 3/4 of the donations are by women. In terms of how many people were donating what, the Toranas seem to have richer and individual patrons such as Nagapriya, who has donated 2 pillars, or Ananda, who we've just mentioned, who was the foreman of the artisans of the Shatavahana kings. Even guilds of ivory carvers from Vidisha have donated an architrave at Sanchi. Now, obviously, guilds themselves were, entire guilds may have been Buddhist, but whether the guild of ivory carvers actually carved the architrave or only donated it is something that we need to actually study a little more. The other important part is that again at Sanchi 1 there are a number of narrative traditions and scenes, and this is a tradition that started in Bharut but it continues in Sanchi Stup 1. There are visual narratives in stone which are distinct and independent forms of narration. This narration is very different from the textual literary narrative tradition. It's quite, I would say that this narrative is quite, there are times when there are differences between what is written and what is actually carved on the Sanchi Stup. There are the same kind of narrative devices being used but in different popularity. There's a different popularity of narrative devices here. The monoscenic, which is static mode and has a precise and regular effect, is less popular here than at Bharut. The synoptic narrative is seen here. There is conflated narrative, and continuous narrative is popularized on the architraves, especially at Sanchi Stup number 1, as we shall see. Sequential narrative, that is one after the other, is used on the pillars. Unlike Bharut, the Vedika and the Ushnish, that is the railing and the coping stone on top of the railing, are relatively plain. What is important here is the massiveness and solidity. You know, you stand there and you can, it's a little higher than man size, life size, and it therefore there is an absolute solidity about these railings. The corner pillars are rectangular with continuous design of carved figurative and vegetative pattern. The coping stone, the Ushnish, is massive, made of cut stone. There are 3 different stones used. Local stone is used for paving and casing. Nagaur stone for Vedika and stone ferried from Vidisha for the Torana. This is to suit the need of carving deeper relief figures on the Torana, uprights and architrave. In fact, the bar relief here is quite deep. If you were to look at this particular slide, you will be able to see how the plan is done. Right in the middle is where the relic casket was. Then you have the Pradakshina Path all around it with 4 corner returns with Toranas at the cardinal points. If you look at vertical elevation of the stupa, it starts with the railing. Then you have the Medhi, which is the platform, so to speak, of the stupa per se. Then on top of that, you have the and or the semi-hemispherical mass. There is a stairway going up, which is called the sopan. And then there is another pradakshina just above the Medhi, which helps the viewer see the architraves of the Torana from a higher elevation. On top is the Harmika with a Harmika Vedika, the Yashti and the Chhatravali. Here you can see it realized actually in the way it is. Here again I would like to point out, if you look very closely, you can see that there is the stone casing on top of which was a plaster. The plaster has fallen off at various places, but you can still see some of it remaining. to give you a view of the two Vedikas or railings, one which is at the ground level and one which is in the just above the Medhi or the base of the and allows the devotee to actually take a pradakshina at a higher level and view the architrave or the torana from high level. This is a old photograph of the north gate of Sanchi Stupa. Okay. I'm just trying to show you how this stupa has been actually organized. Okay. Now we start with the most elaborate of the surviving toranas, which is the north gate. If you look, if you can see that the toranas is made up of two pillars, on top of which you have this middle portion which is supporting the three architraves or crossbars, whatever you want to call them. These architraves are carved on both sides with narrative scenes. There is a great elaboration of the narrative tradition here in Sanchi Stupa number 1, where larger spaces are being devoted to a single narrative. And that is a device, that is a historic as well as an artistic visual development that is characteristic of Sanchi Stupa number 1. Now this particular visual is taken from the rear or the back of the torana, and it is on eye level from the elevated circumambulatory platform. There are three important narratives that are depicted on these three architraves. On the top is the Chadanta Jatak, which shows an elephant incarnation of the Buddha, in which the elephant sacrifices his tusks to a hunter. The second is the temptation of Mara at the time of the enlightenment of the Buddha, and the third is the Visanta Jatak, in which King Visanta, which is another incarnation of Buddha, practices the virtue of generosity. Here we can see that on top there is a more complete decorative scheme surviving than other gates. The architraves are carried by elephants. You can see underneath the three architraves that there are 4 elephants that seem to be endorsed, that is joined like the Sarnath lion, and they are seem to be walking with standards on their head, right? All right. Now here you can see the 2 Jatakas and how they are arranged, with Gajalakshmi on one of the square registers that joins the 2 architraves, and a stoop, the worship of the stoop, on another. On top are 2 vegetative motifs in the registers, and underneath are couples or mithunas sitting on various mythical animals. Now this again, on the registers you have symbols of auspiciousness or mangala, while on the architraves you have scenes from the life of the Buddha in this or the previous birth. Okay. I want to point out 2 things here. One is that you can see that there are yakshas who were placed on top bearing chauris or fly whisks. That again symbolize the sovereignty of the Buddha as well as the worship of the stupa. Then you have the Tri Ratna, which is put on top of the Dharma Chakra. Again, this is symbolizes the message of Buddha, the turning of the wheel of law, and Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, Sangham Sharanam Gacchami, and Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami. On top, again, you can see is the Chadanta Jatak. Various elephants can be seen who are frolicking in the lake of in the Himalayas, which this is a tale that we've discussed in detail when we did Bharut. Underneath these are riders, horse riders, which this processional element is something that is quite new in Sanchi Stup number 1. We do not see this in Buddhist art in such great profusion before this. Here, this has been emphasized in almost all the Toranas. In the lowest of the architraves, you have the Visantar Jataka. Now, this is the incarnation of Buddha as a Bodhisattva just before he was incarnated as Siddhartha. The Visantar is a prince of who is very generous, and he donates the white elephant which brings prosperity to the kingdom to a Brahman who comes to beg. This we cannot see from the other side of the Torana, but we see the aftermath of that. Because he gives away this elephant, he is driven out of the kingdom and he has to go on a vanvas, or he has to go to the forest. On the way to the forest, you can see here from one side, he is going to the forest with his children. A Brahmin comes to beg him and he gives away his children, who sells them into slavery. Okay. Though the king's follower or aims an arrow at this Brahmin, the Visantara asks him not to kill this Brahmin. Okay. He also gives away his wife and retires to the hermitage. Ultimately, Indra acknowledges the selflessness and generosity of Visantara and restores his family and possessions. Here in the narrative, you can see that one moment of the story comes after the next moment. So there are many moments in the story in a continuous narrative. He is leaving the palace, he is giving away his children, he goes to the hermitage or his dwelling place in the forest, etc. So, and how he is restored. So, all these are actually being seen in this narrative. Now, we come to the East Gate. Again, the East Gate is very important, and you have it being carved on both sides. This I am showing you from the outer side rather than from the inner side. That is that one which can be seen from outside the Pradakshina. On the upper architrave, you can see the 7 Manushi Buddhas, that is previous Buddhas, of which the historical Buddha is the latest in the series. Each of the Manushi Buddhas can be recognized by its own particular tree. So you can have an Udumbara tree, a peepal tree, etc. In the middle architrave, you see the great departure of Buddha, and in the lower architrave, you see the visit of Ashoka to the Bodhi tree. The entire is ornamented with elephants and shalabhanjikas, winged lions, peacocks, and the end part of the architraves are marked by solar spirals and Nandipadas. Here I would like to show you the detail of the great departure of Buddha from his palace. The Buddha is depicted by his footprints, and you can see his horse Kanthaka being led away, and there are a lot of people who are actually accompanying him, and he goes, he gains enlightenment, the riderless horse comes back. So the departure from the palace can actually be established here, right? The south gate, which is probably the oldest and the most damaged of them all, marks the main entrance to the stoop. Endorsed lions, like we see at Sarnath, but in a very different spirit here, they are more stylized, carry the architraves. Riders mounted on deer and horses occupy the cross squares, which I have already discussed. You have the Gajalakshmi and the royal visit of Ashoka to the stoop, and scenes of dwarfs among foliage. Right? This is to give you a detail of the scene. The west gate, again this is something that you can see from the architrave, from the middle circumambulatory, that is the rear or the reverse of the architrave. From the top to the bottom, what you can see is the transport of Buddha's relics to Kushinagar, the war of the relics, and the temptation of Buddha by Mara, right? I would like to, again, I'm just trying to tell you this, that you have here very many Avadana tales, that is tales that are from the life of Buddha per se. On in the middle, as you can see, I will show you a better picture. This is a royal procession bringing the relics of Buddha to the city of Kushinagar, which you can see on the left of the panel. So the city and urban architecture, especially fortresses, are very well delineated in at Sanchi Stoop number 1. Secondly, Buddha here is marked by the tree of enlightenment, which you can see just outside the city gates. The elephants that bring the relics are also very well marked. The middle architrave here shows the war of relics. After Buddha attained Parinirvan, there was a struggle over the distribution of relics, with various claimants applying to the Malla kings for the portion which the Mallas were initially unwilling to grant. If you would recall, it is in the territory of the Mallas that Buddha actually gained Parinirvan, and he was cremated in their territory. Here the army is prepared to attack the Malla city. The city again is on the left, which you can see, and but they are prevented at the last moment from attacking by a Brahmin named Drona, who says that these relics can actually be divided. So they were divided into 8 portions and later 2 more, but later 2 more portions of the wood ashes were actually apportioned, but 8 portions of his bone relics were divided amongst 8 territories. You can see here the army being deployed, elephants, people, and in turmoil. This entire episode has been very well delineated on this. Okay. Now I give you two different versions of the same, and at Sanchi Stup number 1, certain depictions are more popular than the others. Here are the two depictions of temptation of Mara at the time of enlightenment. This is a depiction that becomes very popular from Stup number 1, and we see other depictions at other later Buddhist sites. On the north gate, there is a better and more complete depiction of Mara's army, which was made up of disfigured dwarfs and giants and people with, and men with goats' heads or heads on their stomachs, which you can see all of them were trying to frighten Buddha before he gained enlightenment. Mara himself sat on an elephant and directed the activities, who you cannot see in the north portion in such a, in that particular position. Perhaps the man on the throne is Mara. So the misshapen giants and dwarfs can very well be seen on the right side. On the left side, you see the second moment when Mara does not succeed in frightening the Buddha, and Buddha gains enlightenment. After that, he sends his daughters, 3 daughters, who try and tempt the Buddha so that he does not preach his sermon. But Buddha, of course, is not tempted. And this is known as, in Buddhist theology, is known as Mardharashan or Mara Vijay, the victory over Mara. And this is quite a popular kind of a delineation from this time onwards. Again, the same delineation can also be seen in the west gate, where you can see that Mara and his army are trying to tempt the Buddha. Right? There are very many other kinds of depictions of Chadant, of devotional scenes, also the preaching of the Buddha at Sarnath, and the turning of the wheel of law, as you can see in the middle architrave, where he gives his first sermon amongst the deer garden, and you can see the deer, you can see people who are celebrating his the sermon here. This is the north Torana. I'm just trying to show you some of the, these are the, over the uprights, you can see these are Bharputrikas as Yakshas. Okay. Dwarf lions supporting the architraves. A very important element at Sanchi Stup number 1 is the Shalabhanjikas. Are the Shalbhanjikas. Now, Shalbhanjikas were seen at Bharut, but they were still fixed to the pillar, and they had very great element of fertility and fecundity attached to them. Here we see that the Shalbhanjikas have become independent from stone that encased them. They are now carved in the round and carved in a very sensuous and provocative poses. They are, coming out of the Torana, and confronting the viewer, wearing semi-transparent drapery, holding the shakha, the branch of a tree with one hand and entwining the other arm around the vine of another of the tree. So this is a very, very important kind of an element, which is an architectural element, and you hear of this in both the in Buddha Charit of Ashwaghosh, where he calls beautiful women leaning out of the window Toran Shalbhanjikas, and you also hear of Shalbhanjikas as architectural elements in the Natya Shastra of Bharat Muni, where they are called Shalashris. There are, though Buddhist texts themselves do not mention Shalbhanjikas in any context per se, you do hear of Shalbhanjikas as a decorative motif on stupas and palaces from Jaina texts of the 2nd and 3rd century AD, such as the Raja Prashniya Sutra and Jiva Abhigam Sutra, which mention Shodash Shalbhanjikas, 16 Shalbhanjikas. Okay. Now we come to the narrative scenes on the actually on the west, on the gates of the Toranas. Okay. So we have on the west gate, on the obverse, on the front side, you have the Shama Jataka, where there is a self-centered king called Shama, who shoots Shama with a poisoned arrow in order to find out whether Shama is a god or a mortal. Shama, being a mortal, dies from his wound. The king repents and Shama is restored to life by Indra. You can see that Shama's hut and his blind parents are shown in the upper right corner. Below Shama, with a water jug which is going to fill at the lotus pond, is there. Then there are various kinds of aquatic animals and Shama bathing. The king is shown 3 times drawing his bow, observing the result, and finally repenting, standing next to Shama himself. On the west Torana itself, you have the Mahakapi Jatak, which was also shown at Bharut. This Jataka discusses Buddha as Bodhisattva in his previous birth, who takes the form of the monkey king, who saves his group of monkeys despite injury to himself. Okay. Again, you have some stories, narrations from the life of Buddha. Here there is Naga Muchalinda protecting the Buddha. You can see the Naga king at the bottom of this depiction, and the Buddha and the Bodhi tree, that when Buddha was meditating in Bodh Gaya, Naga king came and protected him from the elements of nature. So this is something that you can see in this depiction, and of course all around are these, because at Sanchi Stupa number 1 the depictions are very crowded with observers and celebrants, etc. All of these you can see here. Okay. Here is a very interesting thing where you can see three moments from the same story. This is the descent at Sankesh, which was seen at Bharut also, but here we can see Buddha represented by the tree at top of the ladder, and then again at the bottom of the ladder. At the top of the ladder he is accompanied by various devas of the 33 gods, and at the bottom of the ladder he is welcomed by mortals. So this kind of a further elaboration of the story can be seen at Stupa 1. Alright, this is a very interesting depiction. This is the dedication of the stupa on the north gate, which is in the top inside panel. It could be, it is either the adoration of the stupa or the relics at Kushinagar by the Malla kings, but whatever it is, you can see that there are these people at the bottom of this composition who are wearing foreign apparel. They are wearing tunics and they are wearing hats, conical hats, which are clearly non-Indian in their origins. Perhaps these are Scythians or Greeks or Indo-Greeks or other kind of devotees of Buddha. Right? This is a return to Kapilavastu, or the miracle at Kapilavastu. In the North Gate itself, there is also the miracle at Vaishali, where Buddha is offered a honey bowl full of honey or palm syrup, and offers it to Buddha. Okay. This is a bucolic scene, and you can see that this is actually part of the Uruvela cycle on the East Torana, but we will not really do this very much in detail because it's a very, very long story, alright, where Buddha converts the Kashyapa priests or Brahmins and by performing various miracles. Here he protects the sacrificial fire. You can see the sacrificial fire and the Buddha represented by the tree. Again, this is the conversion of the Kashyapa priests on the East Torana. Here you see that the river Naranjana floods, and the Kashyapa priests are very scared that the Buddha will drown, and they go out in a boat. But Buddha walks on the river, and you can see slabs with his prints on the river, and seeing this miracle, they are converted, and they become very devoted to the Buddha. You can see Buddha at various places being shown by the tree, okay, the Bodhi tree. This was donated by Nagapriya, a banker of Kurara, from Kurara. Okay, this is the great departure from his palace at Kapilavastu. Okay, now this is an interesting one because it shows the birth of Buddha on the top, where Maya Devi is lying down and the white elephant is coming from between the palace roofs to enter her womb. In Barut, this is a very simplified kind of a composition. Here it becomes very complicated, and underneath you have a procession. Again, on the East Torana, and you can see a sequential depiction of the 7 heavens. Okay. On the one slide, you can see Yaksha Dwarapala, who has become from a mere fertility deity, he also becomes a protector of the monument, put on the gate in order to protect the monument. On the other side, you can see various scenes from the life of Buddha, again related to his enlightenment, his visit to Kapilavastu, etc. Various Buddhist symbols such as the Dharma Chakra have also been represented. The land of the heaven of Uttrakuru has been represented. Besides that, we see that various other kinds of inhabitations can be seen. Here you can see 3 kinds of huts being shown in the lower register. So not only do you have urban fortified architecture, but you also have rural as well as forest hermitage architecture being represented over and over again. This is to show you on top the fortifications of a town from which there is this departure that is being shown. All right. So with full of people, witnesses who are looking at this event, hanging out of the balconies. So there is this quite a lot of detail in terms of urban architecture. To show you the view of the pave Pradakshina. Also, I would like to point out that some parts of the like this Sopan Vedika are older and belong to the Shunga period, unlike the Toranas which belong to a later period. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the very interesting lecture. And as I was looking at the slides, you mentioned that in fact, there might be so many of these carvings, the story of the miracle of Niranjana, you mentioned that it was donated by a banker. So, could we say that many were part of donations done by people?
Yeah, as I said at the beginning, of the 631 donations, inscriptions, only 4 are non-donative. The rest are all donative in character.
Oh, that's a remarkable number.
Yeah.
And we're all, so these were divided in number at Bharut, Sanchi, Stup 1 and 2, or say just...
no, at Sanchi Stup 1 there are over 600.
Oh, and there might be so many others.
At Bharut there are 840.
Oh, remarkable.
Yeah.
That's remarkable, ma'am. I wish I had more time for questions, but I've been told that we need to wrap up the lecture. So I'd like to thank you sincerely for being here and being part of our series on the beginnings of Indian art and architecture in early India. And of course, I would like to tell our viewers that ma'am would be associated with us on future occasions as well. So again, thank you so much, ma'am, for being here, and thank you, viewers. Have a lovely day ahead. Thank you.